The golden halls of the Tsarian Empire's palace shone under the twin suns of Sci-Fi. The massive throne room was filled with high-ranking officials, warlords, and noble families. At the center of it all sat Emperor Zorak, his crimson robes flowing like liquid fire. His piercing yellow eyes studied the crowd before settling on his daughter, Princess Thyra. Thyra stood tall, her silver skin glowing under the bright lights. She had trained in combat since childhood, proving herself as a warrior and a leader. She had always believed she would one day lead her people into battle, conquering weaker species and expanding their empire. But today, her father had summoned her for a different reason, one she had not expected. The emperor raised his hand, and the room fell silent. His deep voice echoed across the chamber. "Princess Thyra, my daughter, the time has come for you to fulfill your duty to the empire." Thyra kept her expression calm, though unease stirred inside her. "I am always ready, father. What war must we fight?" The emperor shook his head. "This is not about war. This is about peace." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The Tsarian Empire had never been known for peace. They ruled through strength, not diplomacy. "You are to marry a human," the emperor announced. The room went still. For a moment, Thyra thought she had misheard him. But as she saw the satisfied expressions of some council members and the uneasy looks of others, she realized this was real. Her sharp eyes locked onto her father's. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. "You will marry Captain Elias Carter, the human ambassador," the emperor repeated. "It is the only way to secure peace between our species." Thyra's hands clenched into fists. A human. The thought made her stomach twist with disgust. Humans were weak, fragile, and unworthy. Their technology was impressive, but they lacked the strength of the Tsarians. She took a step forward. "I refuse." Gasps filled the throne room. No one had ever dared to openly defy the emperor before, but Thyra did not care. The emperor's gaze darkened. "This is not a request, Sci-Fi. It is a command." Her anger burned hotter. "You would sell me off to a weak species, to a human." The emperor's voice remained calm, but his tone carried a warning. "This marriage is not about you, Thyra. It is about the survival of our empire." Thyra took a deep breath, struggling to keep her fury in check. "We do not need humans to survive. We have ruled the stars for centuries without them." The emperor sighed. "Times are changing. The humans have grown stronger. They have allies. If we do not make peace now, we risk war, one that may cost us more than we are prepared to lose." Thyra refused to believe it. "Then let there be war. We are stronger than them." The emperor's expression hardened. "Are we? The humans have defeated enemies far greater than us. They adapt. They fight with cunning. We cannot underestimate them." Thyra shook her head. "So you would have me become a bride instead of a warrior?" Thyra walked swiftly through the palace halls, her mind racing. She had to find a way to stop this marriage. She would rather flee the empire than be forced to marry a human. But as she passed the shadowed corridors near the War Council chamber, she heard voices, low and urgent. She stopped, pressing herself against the cold metal wall, and listened. "The marriage must not happen," one voice said. "It won't," another replied. "The human will not live long enough to wed the princess." Thyra's breath caught. Her eyes widened. Someone was planning to assassinate Captain Elias Carter. And if that happened, the humans would blame the empire. War would be inevitable. She had hated the idea of marrying a human. But this was worse. A war based on betrayal. A war that could doom both their species. She had a choice now. Let the human die and watch the war begin. Or warn him and betray her own people. Her fingers tightened into fists. For the first time in her life, Thyra did not know what to do. The emperor stood from his throne, towering over her. "You will do as your duty demands." Silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Zyra's heart pounded. She had fought battles, trained in strategy, and proven herself time and time again. And yet, in this moment, none of it mattered. She was being reduced to a bargaining tool. No, she would not allow it. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the throne room. Zyra's heart pounded as she backed away from the shadowy corridor. The voices continued, whispering deadly plans in the dim glow of the palace lights. The human must die before the ceremony, one voice said. And the princess? Another asked. She will be blamed for the assassination. The humans will have no choice but to retaliate. Zyra gritted her teeth. So that was their plan. They wanted war. They wanted to frame her for a crime she had nothing to do with. Her father believed that peace with humanity was the only way forward, but these conspirators, the warlords, the high generals, disagreed. They would rather see blood in the stars than a treaty in ink. Zyra had spent her entire life believing that humans were weak, that they were nothing compared to the strength of the Tsarian Empire. And yet, here they were, afraid enough to plot an assassination, instead of facing humanity in open war. She had to act. Moving swiftly, she retreated down the hall, her mind racing. She had no love for humans, but she would not let herself become a pawn in this treachery. She needed to warn Captain Ilias Carter before it was too late. She reached the docking bay where the human delegation was housed. The guards at the entrance stiffened at her approach. "Step aside," she ordered. One of them hesitated. "By command of the Emperor, no one is allowed to." Zyra moved fast. Her hand lashed out, striking the guard's pressure point. He crumpled without a sound. The second guard barely had time to react before she hit him as well, knocking him unconscious. She slipped inside. The human ship was smaller than she expected. Tsarian warships were massive, built for destruction. But this vessel was sleek, efficient. It wasn't a warship. It was meant for diplomacy. Zyra stalked through the halls, her senses sharp. She needed to find Ilias before the assassins did. She turned a corner and came face to face with him. Ilias Carter was taller than she expected, his form broad and strong beneath his uniform. His eyes, sharp and alert, locked onto her the moment she stepped into view. "Princess Zyra," he said, his voice calm but wary. "This is unexpected." "There's no time to explain," she said. "You're in danger." His brow furrowed. "Danger? The warlords want you dead," she said bluntly. "They plan to assassinate you and blame me for it." Ilias studied her carefully. She could tell he didn't fully trust her. She wouldn't have trusted him either if the situation were reversed. "Why would you warn me?" he asked. Zyra clenched her jaw. She didn't want to say the words, but she forced them out. "Because war with humanity would be unwise." A small smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. That almost sounded like respect. She scowled. "Don't mistake my words for admiration, human. I still have no interest in this absurd marriage, and I certainly don't care about your survival. But I will not be made into a scapegoat for war." Ilias nodded. "Then I suppose I owe you my thanks." "Don't thank me yet," she muttered. "The assassins won't wait long. We need to leave. Now." As if on cue, a sharp sound rang through the ship. An alarm. They had been discovered. Ilias reacted quickly, pulling a sidearm from his holster. "I assume you have a way out." Zyra's mind worked fast. They couldn't go back to the palace. The warlords controlled too much. Even if she could convince her father of the truth, it wouldn't matter if they were already dead. "There's a hangar bay on the far side of the palace," she said. "If we can reach it, I can get us off-world." Ilias nodded. "Then let's move." They ran through the halls as the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Zyra turned just in time to see black-armored soldiers pouring into the ship, weapons raised. A plasma shot whizzed past her head. She dodged and fired back, her own energy blade igniting with a sharp hum. Ilias took cover behind a metal crate, returning fire with quick precision. They fought their way through the corridors, their movements in sync despite their differences. Zyra had to admit, he wasn't as slow as she had expected. He moved with the reflexes of a trained soldier, and his aim was deadly accurate. Still, there were too many of them. A blast hit the wall near her, forcing her back. More guards poured in, cutting off their escape route. Elias cursed under his breath. Looks like we're out of options. Zyra's mind raced. She refused to be captured. If they fell into the hands of the warlords, they were as good as dead. Then she saw it, a maintenance hatch just above them. "This way," she shouted, leaping up and gripping the edges of the hatch. She pulled herself inside, then reached down for Elias. He hesitated for only a second before grabbing her arm, letting her pull him up. They crawled through the narrow vents as the soldiers searched below. Zyra's heart pounded, but she remained silent. They had escaped for now. But the real danger was only just beginning. The vent was dark and cramped, but Shira moved swiftly, her body coiled with tension. Behind her, Elias followed in silence, his breathing controlled despite the narrow space. Below them, the sound of boots clanking against metal echoed as the warlord soldiers spread through the ship. They couldn't stay here for long. As they crawled forward, Zyra scanned ahead for an exit. The vents stretched deep into the palace, connecting to different sections of the imperial structure. She knew these pathways well. She had used them as a child to slip away from royal duties. But now she wasn't escaping a boring diplomatic lesson. She was running for her life. Elias whispered from behind, "Where does this lead?" "To the lower engineering bay," she murmured back. "If we can reach the power station, I can override security and unlock the hangar doors." And then Zyra hesitated. "Then we leave this world before they kill us both." Elias let out a quiet breath. "Good plan." A few minutes later, she found what she was looking for, an access grate leading to the maintenance level. Carefully, she unlatched the bolts, then pushed it open just enough to peek through. The corridor was empty. She dropped down silently, landing in a crouch. Elias followed, his movements surprisingly quiet for a human. They kept to the shadows, moving quickly through the dimly lit passageways. This area of the palace was rarely used. Most of the royal family never even set foot here, but Zyra knew the way. She led Elias to a control panel near the power core. The station glowed with energy, its pulsating blue light illuminating the walls. "This will give us access to the hangar," she whispered. She pressed her hand against the control screen. The system scanned her biometrics, and after a tense moment, the screen flashed green. "Access granted." Zyra smirked. "We're in." But before she could start the override, a sharp voice rang out. "Step away from the controls." Zyra spun around, her blade igniting in a flash of light. A tall figure stood at the entrance of the chamber, his dark armor gleaming under the electric glow. General Varric, one of her father's most trusted war commanders, and one of the leaders of the conspiracy. Behind him, a squad of heavily armed soldiers aimed their rifles at Tyra and Elias. "You have gone too far, Princess," Varric said coldly. "Did you really think you could betray your own people and walk away?" Zyra clenched her teeth. "I am loyal to the Empire, but I will not be used as a weapon for your war." Varric chuckled. "Oh, but you already are. You just don't see it yet." His gaze flickered to Elias. "And you, human, you should have never stepped foot on this world." Elias raised his weapon, his jaw tightening. "And yet, here I am." Varric sighed. "A shame. If you had died quietly, things would have been much simpler." Zyra's grip on her weapon tightened. They were outnumbered. Fighting their way out wasn't an option. Then she saw it, a backup generator behind Varric. If she could trigger an overload. She met Elias's eyes, giving him the briefest nod. He understood instantly. Without warning, Zyra lunged forward, swinging her energy blade. Varric blocked it, his own weapon clashing against hers in a shower of sparks. At the same time, Elias fired his pistol at the generator. The shot struck true. A loud explosion shook the room, and a pulse of energy blasted outward, knocking everyone off their feet. The lights flickered as the power core destabilized. Zira hit the ground hard but rolled into a crouch. Smoke filled the air, giving them the cover they needed. "Move," she shouted to Elias. Together, they sprinted through the chaos, dodging fallen debris as alarms blared through the palace. The explosion had done more than just disable security. It had sent the entire structure into emergency lockdown. They burst into the hangar, where several ships were docked. Zyra's eyes locked onto a sleek black fighter, a personal craft she had trained with many times. "That one," she said, pointing. Elias nodded, and they rushed toward it. Behind them, soldiers stormed into the hangar, weapons blazing. Plasma bolts shot past them, hitting the walls and scattering sparks. Zyra reached the ship first, slamming her hand on the access panel. The canopy hissed open. She jumped inside, sliding into the pilot's seat. Elias climbed in after her just as more shots rang out. One of the bolts grazed his arm, but he gritted his teeth and powered through the pain. Zyra's fingers flew across the controls. The engines roared to life. "Hang on," she warned. With a deafening blast, the ship lifted off, rocketing through the hangar doors. The palace fell away beneath them as they soared into the skies of Zephyr. But they weren't safe yet. An alarm flashed on the dashboard. "Pursuers incoming," Elias said, looking at the radar. Zira grinned, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Let them come." With a sharp turn, she accelerated into the stars, ready for the fight ahead. The ship trembled as Styra pushed the thrusters to their limit, streaking through the dark void of space. Behind them, 3 Tsarian warships locked onto their signal, their crimson energy cannons warming up to fire. Elias strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat, his injured arm resting against his chest. The wound wasn't deep, but blood seeped through the torn fabric of his uniform. He didn't complain, just tightened his grip on the dashboard. "We have incoming," he said, eyeing the radar. 3 heavy-class interceptors, faster and better armed than us. Zyra's fingers danced over the controls, her eyes burning with determination. "Then we'll have to be smarter." She jerked the controls hard, sending their sleek fighter into a sharp dive, just as the first barrage of plasma fire erupted behind them. The energy bolts sizzled past, narrowly missing their hull. Elias watched the enemy ships adjust their formation. "They're herding us toward the blockade." Zira cursed under her breath. The warlords weren't just trying to kill them, they were forcing them into a dead end. The Tsarian fleet had locked down the planet, a massive war cruiser stationed just beyond the atmosphere. If they got too close, they'd be caught in a tractor beam with no way out. "We need an escape route," Elias said. "Now." Zyra's mind raced. Zyphar's orbit was a maze of debris from centuries of old battles. If she could lead their pursuers into the wreckage, she might be able to shake them. "I have an idea," she said, "but you're not going to like it." Elias glanced at her. "At this point, I'll take anything over getting vaporized." Zyra smirked. "Hold on tight." She yanked the controls hard to the right, sending the ship into a wild spiral. The G-forces pressed against them as they darted toward the remains of a long-abandoned Tsarian battleship drifting in space. The wreckage was massive, its jagged metal edges illuminated by the nearby sun. Elias's eyes widened. "You're flying us into a graveyard." "Exactly," Zyra said. Behind them, the 3 interceptors followed, their pilots relentless. Zyra weaved through the shattered remains of the old warship, banking hard between broken turrets and collapsed corridors. The enemy ships followed, their larger frames struggling to maneuver through the tight gaps. Elias watched the radar. "They're still on us." "Not for long," Zyra muttered. She spotted what she was looking for, a collapsing section of the battleship's hull. its metal structure barely held together by old support beams. If she timed it right, she fired the ship's rear cannons, blasting the weakened supports. The explosion was immediate. The entire section of the wreck caved in, sending a massive cloud of debris outward. Zyra gunned the thrusters, darting through a narrow gap just before the wreckage collapsed completely. The first enemy interceptor wasn't so lucky. It slammed into a twisted metal beam, exploding into a ball of fire. The second ship swerved hard but clipped its wing against a floating engine core, sending it spinning out of control. Only one enemy ship remained. Elias exhaled. That was insane. Zyra grinned. You're welcome. The last enemy ship accelerated, now more aggressive than before. Zyra knew they couldn't keep running forever. Then, another alert blared on the dashboard. New ship incoming, Elias said, checking the scanner. His expression darkened. It's not one of ours. Zyra narrowed her eyes at the screen. A vessel was approaching at high speed, its design unfamiliar, sleek, advanced, far more dangerous than anything she had ever seen before. Then, a voice crackled through their comms. Unknown fighter, identify yourselves. Zyra hesitated. The signal wasn't Syrian. It wasn't human, either. Elias gave her a questioning look. Who the hell is that? She didn't have an answer, but something in her gut told her, whoever they were, they had just become a much bigger problem. The comms crackled again. Unknown fighter, this is your final warning. Identify yourselves or prepare to be boarded. Zyra's fingers tensed over the controls. This wasn't a Syrian warship, and it certainly wasn't human. The vessel looming ahead was unlike anything she had ever seen before. Sleek, dark, and humming with an eerie blue energy. Its surface was smooth, as if it had been grown rather than built. Elias leaned forward, studying the readings. That's not one of ours. And it's not Syrian either. Zyra exhaled sharply. I know. The last remaining Syrian interceptor, still in pursuit, broke off suddenly. The pilot wasn't taking any chances with this unknown ship. A pause. Then the alien vessel fired. A bright pulse of energy lashed out, striking the Syrian interceptor. In an instant, the enemy ship crumbled, its structure dissolving into fragments of burning metal. Elias stared. What? They didn't just destroy it, Zyra muttered. They disintegrated it. The ship's comms buzzed once more. We do not repeat ourselves. Power down and prepare for boarding. Zyra's jaw clenched. She had no intention of surrendering, but their small fighter stood no chance against this unknown force. Elias met her gaze. If we fight, we die. And if we surrender, we might still die. Zyra growled in frustration. She hated being trapped, hated not having control, but she wasn't reckless enough to take on an unknown enemy head-on. With a deep breath, she powered down the ship. Fine, she muttered. Let's see what they want. A bright blue beam enveloped their ship, pulling them in. The moment they were locked in the hangar bay of the alien vessel, the ship's exterior shimmered, sealing them inside. Zyra and Elias unbuckled their harnesses. She grabbed her energy blade, while Elias checked his sidearm. We go together, he said. Zyra nodded. Stay close. The cockpit hatch hissed open, revealing a strange metallic floor beneath them. The air was thick, filled with a scent neither of them recognized. The walls pulsed with faint blue light, as if the ship itself was alive. Then the figures appeared. Tall, slender beings emerged from the shadows, their bodies covered in a flexible, dark exoskeleton. Their faces were smooth, featureless except for glowing blue slits where eyes should be. One of them stepped forward. Welcome, it said in a voice that was neither male nor female. You are now in the presence of the Varak's dominion. Zyra tightened her grip on her blade. She had never heard that name before. What do you want? She asked, her voice sharp. The alien tilted its head. You are Zyra, daughter of Emperor Zoran. And you are Elias Carter, representative of humanity." Elias frowned. "How do you know that?" The Varax ignored the question. "You are now prisoners of the Dominion." Zyra's fists clenched. "We are not your prisoners." A low hum filled the chamber, and in an instant energy restraints clamped around both of their wrists. The Varax's glowing eyes flickered. "You were never given a choice." Zyra struggled against the energy restraints, but they held firm, humming with a strange, pulsing warmth. Not like metal, not like any technology she had ever encountered. It was almost alive. Beside her, Elias flexed his fingers, testing the bonds. "This isn't good." "No, really." Zyra snapped. The Varax beings surrounded them in eerie silence, their featureless faces unreadable. The one who had spoken before stepped forward again. "You do not seem to grasp your situation," it said calmly. "Your war with the Tsarians is meaningless. Your alliances, temporary distractions. The Dominion does not concern itself with petty struggles. Then why are we here?" Elias demanded. "What do you want with us?" The Varax alien tilted its head slightly. "Because you, Elias Carter, are human. And you, Zyra Zorin, have chosen to align yourself with one." Zyra's eyes narrowed. "What does that have to do with anything?" A pause. Then, for the first time, the Varax leader took a slow step closer. "You do not know what you are." Zyra frowned. "Excuse me." "You believe yourself to be the heir to the Sci-Fi Empire. You believe your father's war is the greatest battle of your time. But you are mistaken." The restraints around their wrists loosened slightly. The Varax leader gestured toward a translucent panel on the far wall, where shimmering holographic images flickered to life. Zyra and Elias turned their heads. At first, the images looked like star maps, systems, and coordinates spanning the galaxy. Then they shifted. Planets. Hundreds of them. Some barren, others burning. Some shattered into drifting fragments. Zyra's breath caught. What is this?" "The remnants of worlds," the Varax said. "The evidence of what happens when your kind and his kind cross paths." Elias's jaw tightened. "Are you saying humans destroyed these planets?" The alien's glowing eyes pulsed. "No, you misunderstand. It is not intentional. It is inevitable." Zyra's heart pounded. "What are you talking about?" The hologram shifted again, displaying what looked like recorded footage. Two alien species, one humanoid, one entirely insectoid, stood together in what seemed to be a diplomatic meeting. Then, suddenly, something changed. The humanoid's eyes widened in shock. The insectoid staggered back. A violent pulse of energy erupted between them. Something unseen, something unmeasurable. A moment later, the recording cut to the aftermath. The entire planet was in ruins. Zyra swallowed hard. The Varax leader continued, its voice disturbingly calm. "This is what happens when humanity touches something it was never meant to." Elias stared at the projection. "That's ridiculous. Humans aren't some kind of galactic poison." The Varax alien studied him for a long moment. Then, with an almost imperceptible tilt of its head, it responded, "You are." Zyra clenched her fists. "That's insane. Humans have barely begun expanding into the galaxy. You can't blame them for." "Do you think this is the first time?" The Varax interrupted. Silence. Zyra's stomach twisted. "What?" The alien gestured toward the hologram again. The image changed once more. This time, it showed something far older. Ruins. Vast, crumbling cities on a distant world. Towers reduced to dust, remnants of an ancient civilization lost to time. "Before your empire," the Varax said, "before your father's wars, there was another. A species that once ruled these stars, long before your kind ever left their world." Elias's brow furrowed. "Who were they?" The Varax leader's voice was almost a whisper. "They were humans. The words hit Styra like a physical blow. "That's impossible," she said, shaking her head. "Humanity is new to the stars. They are not." Zaira's breath caught. Elias's hands tightened into fists. "You're saying there was another human civilization, one that came before ours?" The Varaks stepped closer, their glowing eyes locking onto him. "Not one. Many." Elias felt his pulse hammering in his ears. "Then, what happened to them?" The alien's answer was simple. "They ended." Zaira's throat was dry. "How?" The Varak's leader finally leaned in, speaking so softly it was almost lost beneath the hum of the ship. "They touched something they should not have." Elias exhaled sharply. "And you think we're going to do the same?" The Varak's leader didn't blink. "You already have." The ship rumbled beneath their feet, as if the universe itself was shifting around them. Zaira and Elias exchanged a look. For the first time since this nightmare began, Zaira felt something cold settle in her chest. Fear, not of the Varaks, not of the war she had fled, but of the truth. Silence filled the chamber, thick and suffocating. The words of the Varaks echoed in Zaira's mind, each syllable pressing down on her like an unbearable weight. "They touched something they should not have." "You already have." Elias ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "You're telling us that humans existed before, that they built civilizations across the stars, and then, what? Just vanished." The Varak's leader remained still. "They did not vanish. They collapsed." Zaira clenched her fists. "Because of something they found." The Varak's glowing eyes flickered. "Because of something that found them." A cold shiver ran down Zaira's spine. Elias exhaled. "You're being vague on purpose." The Varak's alien stepped toward them, the restraints on their wrists releasing completely. "Because understanding does not grant you protection," it said. "The others thought they could prepare, thought they could stop what was coming. They were wrong." Zaira shook her head. "That's ridiculous. You're telling me an entire advanced civilization, no, multiple civilizations, just crumbled without a fight." "They fought," the Varaks said simply. "They lost." Zaira's breath hitched. Elias stared at the holograms, his mind trying to piece together the puzzle. If this is true, then why is Earth still standing? Why haven't the humans of this era been wiped out? The Varaks was quiet for a moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it raised a single, slender hand. The cycle was broken. Zaira frowned. "What does that mean?" "Your species fell into darkness," the Varaks said. "A reset. Your kind was forced to start over from the ashes of a forgotten past. The ones who came before you were erased." Zaira's chest tightened. "By who?" The Varaks did not answer immediately. It simply gestured toward the holographic images once more. This time, a single planet came into focus. Earth. The familiar blue and green world rotated slowly in the air before them, beautiful yet fragile. Elias swallowed. "We're not the first." "No." Zaira turned to the alien, her mind still refusing to accept what she was hearing. "Then what happens now?" The Varaks finally gave a direct answer. "You have been seen." The words hit harder than Zaira expected. Elias's brow furrowed. "Seen by what?" The Varak's leader stepped closer, and for the first time, its voice dropped to something that almost resembled emotion. "By what ended them." The chamber trembled. Not from an explosion. Not from movement. It was something else. A ripple. A shift in the very fabric of reality. Zaira's stomach twisted. What was that? The Varaks lifted its head, as if listening to something only it could hear. Then, in a whisper, it spoke. "They have noticed." The ship's lights dimmed. Shadows stretched unnaturally. A deep, distant hum filled the air, not from the ship itself, but from something outside it. Elias's breath hitched. "What the hell is that?" The Varaks turned its glowing gaze toward them, its voice calm despite the growing tension in the air. "You are out of time." Zira barely had a moment to react before the ship lurched. The walls around them bent, not like metal under strain, but like reality itself was being pulled in different directions. A strange, hollow sound rang through the chamber, like a whisper coming from the depths of space. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't words. It was something older, something hungry. Zira grabbed Elias's arm, her instincts screaming at her to run. "What's happening?" Elias shouted. The Varax's glowing eyes dimmed slightly. "It has begun." Then, the entire ship was consumed by darkness. Zira's eyes snapped open. She was falling. Not through space, not through air, through nothing. Her body twisted as she tumbled, her mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening. The stars were gone. The ship was gone. Elias. A hand grabbed her wrist. She barely had time to react before she was yanked out of the abyss. Her back hit solid ground. She gasped, lungs burning as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Dim blue light flickered overhead. The walls pulsed with that strange, alien energy. The Varax ship. She was back. Elias coughed beside her, shaking his head. What the hell just? Then they saw it. Outside the ship, beyond the walls of the Varax vessel, space itself was broken. Tiers in reality stretched open, revealing glimpses of things not meant to be seen. Shapes that didn't make sense. Eyes that were too large. Hands with too many fingers, reaching. The Varax stood motionless, its glowing eyes fixed on the abyss outside. Zira forced herself to stand. What is that? The alien didn't turn to her. The end of all things. Elias's fists clenched. Then we stop it. The Varax finally turned its gaze toward them. The others tried. Zira gritted her teeth. Then they weren't good enough. A pause. Then, for the first time, the Varax leader tilted its head in something almost resembling curiosity. "We shall see." The ship trembled as the abyss outside moved, and the fight for survival truly began.